Hello, welcome to Establish, a youth ministry podcast hosted by the AC UK. My name's Jake.
And my name is Emmy, and today is our first episode, and we are going to be looking at where do I start? We really hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Establish. I'm really excited that you're listening to this podcast. We have a very special guest with us today, and his name is Ben Jones. He is the founder, he is the founder of Missional Generation, and I'm so excited that he's going to talk us through some really practical steps about establishing youth ministry. So get excited, get ready. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, it's going to be so beneficial to you in your work and in your ministry. Let's go. Ben, it is so good to have you on the show, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, could you just talk to us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and what Missional Generation is?
Yeah, it's so good to be with you guys, and just to be able to just share a little bit of the story from our side of the pond on how to develop youth work, or what we've done around developing youth work in local churches. So I run Missional Generation, and it's been going on for nearly 13 years. And the things that we've done in the last 4 years is how do we employ and deploy youth workers and children's workers into local churches for 6, 12, 18 hours to help the church to breathe once again. I'm not going to say this word long, but COVID caused the church to question, how do we do our practices and our rhythms within youth work? How do we raise up great leaders? How do we establish great practices and procedures around youth work? And then recently, in the safeguarding crisis that we've seen going on in the church, we need to relook at this once again. And so we have the joy of coaching churches across the M62 corridor in developing youth work and children's provision. And we particularly are employing and deploying youth workers into local churches for 6, 12, 18 hours. And the rest of the stuff, you can find us out on our website and Instagram. You don't need to hear about Missional Generation. Today, we're talking about how can you do youth work in your local churches.
And we're really aware that we want this podcast to be applicable for people who may be trained youth workers, but also who just have a real heart to reach young people, regardless of training, regardless of anything else. Just if you're wanting to see young people meet Jesus, we want this podcast, our desire for this podcast is to really be able to help practically with that. So one of our questions, our first question actually for you, Ben, that we'd love to just delve deeper into, what are the real practical and immediate steps that we can take when wanting to start a youth ministry?
Well, I'm going to reflect back on one of the churches we've recently been supporting in Leeds called Rothwell Baptist. And what they did is they spent a long time praying in the practices, the procedures, the opportunities, the resource, the children, the young people. And out of all the churches we're supporting, not having one as my favourite, but I would have to struggle to not say that this is one of my favourites because they've prepared the ground in prayer. And I know that's a really obvious question to say, how do we do youth work? Well, we should pray. Well, that is actually really true, because once we prepare the ground in prayer, we're actually recognizing God's heart. And then all of our motive behind what we do, all of the practicalities of how what we do is held up on that vision through intimacy of intercession. That is really key, because then when things do become slightly difficult, like the budget is struggling to do the youth group sessions for the tuck shop to be replaced, we're actually going, well, wait a minute, we made a decision to make an inhabitable space, a place of safety for young people, because we sense God saying, make yourself a place of safety, if that's what came out in prayer. So I think prayer is really key. And then you need to refine your practices and your procedures, volunteer agreements, your volunteer strategies, your evaluation processes are really key, because they are the foundations of what makes a safe place become really safe and effective. And if we don't do that, we get ourselves into a bit of a pickle. And we also don't know how to help move people into the right places, because somebody may think they're a welcomer at the registration, but actually what they really are is a discipler in a small group. And actually we're missing out on them moving into that space unless we understand how to truly get our team in the right places. And so recruitment is really important. Safe practice is really important. Safeguarding procedures are absolutely important as well. And an evaluation. one of the things we love to do in our context is do an evaluation every week, practice evaluation and professional evaluation. So what was it that went well within the volunteer structures and in the activities? That's the practice element. What key conversations need to be carried on for next time? Helpful thoughts to plan into the strategy of planning. Those are questions that you need to ask. And then the professional is, how did the person who may be employed or voluntarily trained, how did they run? How did they feel? Did they feel like they got the sense that they did what they wanted to do and what their planning preparations was? What potential training needs to be happen? How does that connect to a portfolio strategy if you've got CPD development in your youth ministries, which is a whole podcast in itself talking about that, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. And I love what you're saying about prayer, because even, what we've been considering about what does it look like to establish something from nothing, right? In terms of getting something off the ground. And I feel like sometimes we can undervalue the power of prayer and almost make out as though, well, if I have young people, then I can pray. But I feel like the process that you've just said is going, no, actually, we pray, and then God gives us insight, he gives us wisdom, he gives us the motivation to get on and do greater ministry. And so I think like actually the most next generational churches, if you like, are the ones that are committed to praying. They're the ones that are contending in prayer. And I love that it's so it feels really practical and spiritual all merged together at the same time. Ben, like, can you just maybe just give us a little bit of the process, if you like, of what it looks like for you in your context to help get youth ministry off the ground?
Yeah, so we developed a conversation strategy, and this really has to be done in conversation. It's not a practical sort of sheet that you fill out, called an MOT. And just like you MOT your vehicle every year, because you cannot put the insurance policy on there, you can't drive, you can't go to journeys, you can't explore the world. It's the same when it comes to It's the same when you come to when you can't do youth work unless you MOT. So motivation, opportunity, timescale. That's what MOT stands for. And what's also exciting is you can MOT your staff. You can MOT the young people, your young leaders. So once you start to inhabit that kind of refining, reflection, application process, which is MOT, you get the confidence in what you want to deliver on the outcomes. So let's break this down a little bit. Let's look at what MOT stands for. And I'm going to throw some questions back at you guys. I hope that's all right, because I want to hear what your motivations are.
Yeah, we're ready for it. We're ready.
I love it, Ben. We've got you on the show as a guest and you're turning it on its head. First episode, we've become the guests.
So when we look at motivation, what leads you or I to start a youth ministry? Yes, it's about encountering young people and leading them to encounter Jesus. That's really cool. That's really important. However, motivation is also maybe a past experience. So the question back to you guys is what motivates you to do youth work based on your past experience, whether that's somebody who's come alongside you, like for me, it was a fatherly figure, because breakdown in fatherly relationships was tough for me in a secondary school time of my life, or whether it was a grandparent that made me feel valued and secure that wasn't my own grandparent, but it was a grandparent of a friend that I found that they shared Bible stories with me. Or was it a vicar in training who felt like he had to do the youth ministry, but actually something of his character resonated in me? Or was it the freedom to be myself that my youth group cultivated? Because all of those things is what's going to motivate me to want to inhabit those spaces and opportunities. So I've given you time to think now as I've waffled on. What is, and one of you can jump in, what's the motivation behind you wanting to do youth ministry? Because that will share some of the motivation opportunities in our listening with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer the question.
Go for it, ladies first.
All right. So background, I always wanted to be a vet. Always wanted to be a vet. My dad was a vet. Whenever I had school holidays, I'd go into his vets with him and spend time there. So that's what I always wanted to do. When I was 12, I went through a really tricky situation where the youth worker of my church was really integral to helping me get through that. And we journeyed probably it was for years, but really like an intense journey over about 8 to 10 months, where they really came alongside me. I know that they were really praying and really standing in a lot of gaps, which is what was really necessary at the time, and really just displaying God to me, just displaying Jesus to me in this rough time. And I remember them being at a festival in the summer, again when I was 12, and God really said to me clearly, you're not going to be a vet, you're going to be a youth worker.
Wow.
And you're going to be in ministry.
Wow.
And this is what you're going to do. Which obviously as a 12-year-old, I was like, oh, cool. Like, you've got no idea the importance that moment really has on your life. I now sit here as a 29-year-old who I've only ever done youth ministry in my adult life. And that definitely is one of my personal reason
It's great.
for why I do what I do, because the importance of standing in gaps for young people and pointing them towards Jesus, there is nothing more important than that for me.
And for me, I've had loads of time to think about this now, haven't I? Because I feel yeah, exactly. There's no beating that. I feel like for me, one of the things as a young person, I remember I grew up in church. My dad was in ministry, and for me, it was the significant crossover of experiencing God for myself, and not just going through the kind of the rhythms of kind of going along to church, because that's what my dad kind of did in ministry, and my family went to church every Sunday. Even when we'd go on holiday, we'd still go to church in different places and stuff. And the significance of a few youth workers growing up in different a few youth workers and them kind of like them desperately wanting me to experience God for myself and not just experience it through my family context. And so from my point of view now, I guess like I feel like really, really motivated for young people to tangibly experience God's presence for themselves. That would be like a real deep desire for me.
Mm.
And there are personal experiences. I'm sure our listeners have probably reflected back on who was it that was inspirational for them, that provided a safe place, that gave them a chance to be listened to, that valued them to become something as opposed to conform to something, and also give them a sense of God's presence and the welcomingness of his wonderful place of worship, which is the church. These are really massive personal experiences, and what we try and do with this kind of discussion is get them to put out there their words, and in some ways a bit of a vulnerable space to talk about what motivates us, because sometimes it's all about we want to achieve great things. Well, actually motivation is also about I experience hardship and I don't want to see that happen again on the watch of my children, young person, or I want to stand in the gap and prevent that from happening. So my motivation is to be the shield, but to be also a space for conversation and shelter. And so these things are really important, because this gives us a desire that when things are difficult, or when we feel like we're not seeing hundreds of young people knocking on our door on week 2, which I believe God can do, but I also think the reality is it's probably just the 2 that turn up the next week. And actually it goes back to that vision board. So the motivation is very much a vision board, but also a temperature gauge to say, when we're inviting new people in later down the line, new volunteers, we're asking them to add their story to the motivation, but also understand the collage of what has also been before them, so that they can be inspired and nurtured, because those are the things that would make us go out of our way. Motivation makes us go out of our way to try something, to do something, to establish something, because of our own personal experience, but also to build foundations that firm for the next generation to experience.
Yeah, you've really challenged me on how to do that.
And just to add on that, what I love about what you're saying, Ben, is I think sometimes tensions in youth ministry with team members arises from, and it's not a bad thing, that there's a testimony that the way that they discovered God, or the experiences that they've gone through, they want to do youth ministry slightly different because of the motivation that they carry. And I love what you said, because what you're saying is actually, if you know those things really well, then it helps in not just in the beginning initial stages, but I think it helps over a longer period of time and you begin to realize actually the reason why they want to work alongside that really troublesome teenager more than the other kids is because of the background, the history that they've got, the motivation that's rooted in, that God's probably placed in their heart, is for that teenager, probably because of the experiences that they've gone through. And I think it helps not just in the establishing stages, but I think it helps in right the way through.
So there are so many things that motivate us that we can drill down, and I pretty much organize a youth ministry right now as a phantom ministry. But the reality is taking time to understand what motivates us as leaders, but also as those potentially coming in, allows us to then understand the opportunities that comes from that. And we can come on to that in a minute.
Well, let's move on to that. Let's go on to the opportunities. Like, how do we discern what the opportunities are?
Yeah. So again, this goes back, and I'm going to keep going back to that volunteer application process, because in that you can ask them, what are your hobbies, talents, skills, ambitions? What is your life experience? What has been your recent vocation experience, your jobs? Because a lot of the stuff that we could put into youth clubs could be the table tennis, the PlayStation, the Xbox, the air hockey, the board games. All of those things are great things, but connectivity around something practically, proactively, enables those deep conversations to have. There was a piece of research that was done by the Church of England that led into a book called Accompanying, and it was about company young people through life and thoughts, as opposed to just sitting doing table tennis. And this is the thing that we can do. Yes, opportunities are a building. Physical spaces is an opportunity, which is really important to think about. How do we make use of the physical buildings that we have? But also concepts like ideas that we can bring, activities, things that we can share from our volunteer agreement process, that we want to bring something. Because you might have John, who's incredibly gifted in baking, and Mavis, who's incredibly gifted in cross stitch, or John, whoever. Those are things you need to pull in. Like, how do we make a safe space for cross stitch, for conversations to take place? And how do we make hospitality work with John doing some pancakes one night, even though it's not pancake night? But it gives John and Mavis that moment to say, I have the space, I know what my role is, and I know that the theme is today, and I'm going to try and find natural ways to say, how's your week been? Oh, we're going to be talking about something linked to a theme later about this. It gives them language. It gives them confidence. It gives them a space to identify with. Yes, also people and groups are really important as well. And also creating regular resources that we can have in there, which are your incredible games and interactive play, your craft activities, drawing, laptops that could be used for school work that they can do. These are really great things. But I think you need to be looking back at the person that we have in the room and what they bring.
We've got a bit of a timescale on this podcast, so it would be good to, in a really succinct way, if that's okay, Ben, just to give us a little bit of an explanation about what that timescale aspect and element looks like.
Yeah, so really you need to ask them quite clearly when you're building your team, are you involving yourself for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? Is there a reason because you got something you want to share of your personal testimony? Well, maybe they're a guest speaker. If it's a reason, a season, it might be they want to do it for a period of time because they've got a bit of a lighter diary, but they want to get involved. Or is it a lifetime because they really feel called to the idea of youth ministry and children's ministry, but particularly, and encouraging them to understand what capacity they have to give, and the timescale and the realisticness of their availability, but also shaping that gives them confidence to know where they might have a place and a role, and then learning to give them that time to review how much time they've given and whether they've given enough time or whether they think they want to be involved more on the rota. That again comes through conversation with your team and giving spaces for that. It also helps you to understand how much training that you need to put in place for those individuals. If it's a guest speaker, don't put them on a training program to do how to talk to young people. But if it's a season, maybe they need to do a lighter version. If it's a reason for a long term, then they need to be involved. So the time scale then sort of provokes our hand to know how to do follow on, how to do evaluation correctly, how to make sure training's happening, and also giving space for them to meet with you and kind of look at it from a point of view of how they enjoy, what they don't enjoy about it. So that's the timescale: season, reason, or lifetime, which would be really helpful. And it's one of the smaller elements of the MOT processes, because you'd want to make sure that you're planning your rotas correctly by knowing the capacity of people's time.
It's really helpful. I think what you're saying is so practical. It's holistic as well, in terms of sometimes our expression of youth ministry when we're trying to make an impression, it can be quite shallow. And I love that you've just got depth. You've got a holistic approach to what you're saying. And I think the listeners, wherever anyone's listening to this podcast, hopefully if it's in their car, if it's in the gym, whatever, they're already thinking, okay, what's the opportunity? What is the timescale? What are these practical things that I can do to implement the next stage or the next step in establishing effective youth ministry?
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate everything that you have shared in this episode. What a first episode.
Wow. So many things, so many takeaways. So
many. I was writing notes the entire time. But thank you, Ben, so much for joining us. And for those people that are listening as well, follow Ben and the work that he is doing with Missional Generation on Instagram. You've got a website as well. But be encouraged by what it is that they're doing, and support them as well. They do a lot of really helpful things within social media. So thank you for listening to our first episode of Establish. We really pray that it has been really fruitful for you. We hope that it has been practical as well in how you look to start a youth ministry. And we will see you next time.